Your time's expired. Senator Singh.
Well, isn't it ironic that some 2 years ago, when the Abbott government was elected, it reduced Australia's humanitarian intake of refugees by almost a third. That's down from 20,000 to 13,750 at a time when the UNHCR is reporting that there is the highest figure on record of displaced people, forcibly displaced in the world, some 59.5 million. And over half of those were children refugees in the world. So, with more than 4 million Syrians now having fled their country, the world is dealing, of course, with the worst refugee crisis since World War II. And, of course, it demands urgent and compassionate response. It demands, of course, an increase in our country doing its part over and above our annual humanitarian intake. Our intake, as I just highlighted, has already been reduced by almost a third 2 years ago. And why? Because we must play our part as a global citizen. Australia is a wealthy country, and we are better placed than many nations to make a strong and urgent contribution. And I note the contributions by those government senators who talk about saving lives at sea. It's a mantra we hear time and time again in this parliament. But if the government is serious about saving lives at sea, it must do more to resettle those in need before they have no other choice than to make that perilous journey. Now, that is the situation we are currently in. We're in a situation which is the largest humanitarian crisis since World War II. And in that, we don't need an immigration minister to fly halfway around the world to have meetings in Geneva to work out what we all know, what the Australian community knows needs to happen. Now, Labor has made a call today to ask the government to implement an additional 10,000 humanitarian places for refugees displaced by the conflict in the Middle East, for those most in need, determined by the UNHCR, to be settled here and brought to Australia, a safe haven that we are. Of course, there have been similar calls from civil society. I noticed Amnesty International calling to resettle 20,000 Syrian refugees. Both the opposition and civil society are asking its government to do what any good global citizen government would do, and that is to increase our humanitarian intake, just like our European neighbours are doing, to help those most in need. It is vital for Australia to support as many Syrian refugees as we can, starting with the people considered most in need by the UNHCR. And on top of that, to provide the UNHCR with the support that it will need for its ongoing humanitarian relief efforts in response to the Syrian crisis. And again, Labor has called on the government to immediately implement an extra $100 million in that vein. Now, why do we do this? Well, we do this because we have the capacity, we have the ability, and our values tell us to do this. It is simply something we should be doing immediately. We don't need Minister Dutton to come back and tell us something that we already know needs to happen. In fact, some state Liberal premiers even know this needs to happen. I note in my home state even, Premier Will Hodgman, as well as the Premier in New South Wales, are trying to talk to their Liberal federal counterparts. So where is the government here? It sounds like it is completely alone in its position of not acting on this issue. It's deeply disappointing for Prime Minister Abbott to merely choose to reshuffle the refugee waiting list and displace other people in desperate need instead of showing genuine compassion and increasing our overall intake. Our intake currently stands at 13,750. It is not enough in itself. let alone to add on the Syrian refugees that need settlement and need to come to our country. We have to increase our humanitarian intake, just like we did in 1999 when 4,000 Kosovars came to Australia in desperate need, again, for a global citizen like Australia to act, just like the East Timorese, 2,000 East Timorese did around that same time when Australia then acted. Again, that is what is needed now. That is what Labor is calling on, just like Germany has done. In fact, Germany has been remarkable in its efforts, as has a number of other countries, the UK, and dare I say it, the role that Lebanon has played. Lebanon, a country a ninth the size of Tasmania, with a population of some 4 million people, has taken in 1.2 Syrian refugees in itself. And here we are debating as to whether, we should, dare I say it, increase our humanitarian intake by 10,000, maybe 20,000, or keep it as it is at only a mere 13,000. We can do way, way better than this. We have Germany saying it will take up to 800,000. Again, another small country in land and size compared to ours. We are a rich, wealthy nation. We can do so much better than this. I sincerely ask our Prime Minister to take the politics out of this. This is about head and heart, but both of those things mean we should act bipartisanly together and ensuring that we do settle brings these refugees in the Middle East from Syria and Iraq to our shores. And so I think that's what the Australian public want too. I think the Australian public would respect a compassionate government that was frank about its desire to support refugees and protect their children from harm and abuse, and of course stop them taking that perilous journey to sea.
Thanks, Senator Singh. Your time